Dear all, a very warm welcome to the Havells Present Spotlight series organized by Realty Plus Masterclass. Spotlight is a monthly webinar series which explores the dynamics of lighting, featuring nationally and internationally acclaimed lighting consultants, designers, and experts who share their knowledge and expertise on the future trends in the world of lighting. I'm Sapna Srivastava, editor Realty Plus magazine, and let's begin with a brief introduction of Realty Plus. Can we have Devi, please?
Some people are born to show the world which path to choose in a crisis. Some brands are born to do the same. And during the times of challenge, the stalwarts of Indian real estate industry have chosen to do just that by showing others the way to finding opportunities even amidst a crisis. By showing the world how to go about delivering on promises even amidst adversity. Success doesn't just happen, it happens by design, by pushing the boundaries, by raising the bar. It's days of creating a vision and nights of bringing it to life. Knowing that pictures are worth 1,000 words and every word makes a difference. It's doing the research, trusting your instinct and finishing what you started. For the past 17 years, Realty Plus has been turning obstacles into opportunities, keeping the industry informed on the latest developments. Innovating to inspire debate and discussion. Bringing forth the perspectives of industry leaders. Honoring hard work and achievement. Keeping the industry connected. This is what we are built on. This is what we are building. We are Realty Plus and we lead the way.
This was a brief snippet of Realty Plus products, and to know more about us, do get in touch with Ms. Tripti Kedia, publisher and business head, Realty Plus. And now moving on to the program of the day, I welcome Mr. Partha Karmakar, business head for professional lighting at Havells Group. Let me give a brief introduction of Mr. Karmakar. He is a passionate lighting professional with overall experience of more than 2 decades in lighting industry and hands-on experience on lighting design, specification sales, marketing, product management, and managing business verticals. He is a strong techno-commercial professional, and through the career, he has been involved in some of the very prestigious installations across the country and abroad. Mr. Karmakar, a very warm welcome to you. Can we have you on the screen? Thanks, Mr. Karmakar, for joining us. And if you can just share, a very crisp views on what this Spotlight series is all about and the episode today that we are going to have.
Yeah, very warm welcome to everybody and very good afternoon to everyone, Sapna, and certainly Reality Plus. So this is a very interesting moment for us to have the Spotlight series. Spotlight is a very important initiative which has been taken by Havells. Let me just tell you, why Spotlight, because before we get and understand a little bit about what is spotlight, it's important that why in lighting this is required. Because when I look at light, light is life, because without light, there is no life. It is so important, like air and water. And over the years, we have been using light just like a instrument which is throwing some light. But I would relate this very much similar to maybe a handset device. It has evolved from just talking to a huge gamut of services beyond just talking. So similarly, I think light also, the equipments which are used for providing light have also greatly evolved last so many years, and it is no more just a light, so it is evolved in multiple dimensions and extended to multiple areas of creating well-being, as well as light can actually improve the health of people, was something which was a very far information. Yeah, so many people were not aware that it is possible. So it is Spotlight is a platform where we are happy to bring in experts of this industry who have a larger experience and exposure on hands-on lighting projects, who can bring in how the overall industry has evolved. They can bring in the knowledge, the learning, which we all can get benefited. So it is primarily just a learning platform where we are getting the expectations of the market more visible and available for us from point of view of our internal team, whether these are product development people or the marketing or the touch points in the marketplace or the supporters and customers. So it's a very vast global platform which actually gives us the chance to learn from experts. So that's why I say that from Havells, this is a very strong initiative which will help us be in the right position in the marketplace of imparting right information and right education.
Thanks, Mr. Karmakar, for setting the tone of the day. And as you rightly said, lighting has come into focus, especially in the last 1 year when we have been restricted to indoors. And human centricity and wellness are the topical subjects that everyone is talking about. So yes, as you rightly said, who best than to have an expert to talk about it? So now let us bring on stage the star of the day, who is a born artist and has a special talent in understanding and analyzing building architecture. So let me introduce our eminent speaker of the day, Mr. Praveen Pampy, Creative Director, the Ministry of Light. Let me also give a brief introduction of our speaker. Mr. Praveen Thampi started his career as a lighting designer in the year 2000 and then went on to establish his own lighting design and consultancy firm called the Ministry of Light, with offices in Hong Kong, Mumbai, and Dubai. It is today one of the largest architectural lighting designing firms in Asia Pacific. Praveen Thampi is a member of the Indian Society of Lighting Engineers and is one of the few lighting consultants worldwide who specializes in innovative and sustainable office lighting techniques by blending the ASHRAE standards, CIB-SE LG7 guidelines, and IGBC LEED standards. Over the years, he has conceptualized and designed the lighting for several world-renowned monuments and heritage structures and has won the IESNA Illumination Design Award in 2004 and Young Design Entrepreneur of the Year 2010 award by the British Council. So, Mr. Praveen Thampi, a very warm welcome to you. And thanks for joining us here today. I hand it over to you now.
Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, good evening. I mean, it's good afternoon, everyone. We have a very interesting and one of my favorite topics, which is how we can kind of blend wellness and sustainability together in an office environment. So let me start with the presentation. 1 second. Sorry, just am I audible and is my screen visible?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so let's directly delve into today's topic. We are looking at how we are looking at aligning wellness and sustainability for smart buildings. Now, to me, we already have, as far as wellness is related, we have something called as the WELL standards from the Well Building Institute. And as far as sustainability is concerned, we have the LEED standards, which comes in from the US Green Building Council originally, and now we have various versions of that in different countries in different green label formats. But before I get into that, I would like to run you through a little bit of a history on the evolution of office lighting throughout the decades since the 1960s and 70s to the 90s. And then in the 2010, how with the advent of LEDs, things started changing. So we all know that till 90s, when we had no PC screens in office spaces, it was a office full of papers. So predominantly the working plane was the tabletop. And that is where CIPC in the earlier days had defined lux levels, defined on the application and the kind of activity that goes on. And they defined various lux levels on tabletop. So these were fixed uniform illuminance levels on work planes for different types of activities and areas. Now, this slowly started changing to variable dynamic zone lighting that is derived from human needs, well-being, the task, and the perception of space. It originally started with the advent of Windows 3 and Windows 95. So predominantly the 90s is when things started changing, where we left from doing our tasks on the horizontal plane to the vertical plane when you had video display units or screens. So immediately when Windows 95 became very popular and people started using desktops in office spaces, CIPC immediately changed the basic lighting guidelines for workspaces. And they said, yes, of course, they looked at horizontal plane illumination. They did not really look at vertical plane illumination. They said, yes, for CAD workstation kind of spaces, you need at least 500 lux. What was interesting was what they originally noticed was with the conventional lighting, we had the issue of reflected glare or reflections of the luminaire coming onto the screens. So that is where they introduced 3 categories of mirror optic systems, which would cut down the glare and cut down the reflections on the screen. So we had category 1, category 2, and category 3 kind of luminaires. And if you have worked on office projects in the 2000s, a Cat2 system was the most popular kind of system, where you would limit the luminance from the luminaire beyond 65 degrees at 200 candelas per meter square, which would basically curtail the reflections of the luminaires on the screen. Now, with this, of course, it did work effectively in terms of achieving no reflections on the screen. But if you look at the screen, you already notice that your ceiling tends to be relatively dark and your vertical illuminance is dark. So what actually happened was they did not realize that when the task changes from the horizontal plane to the vertical plane. And when you had larger floor plates coming up with improved building construction, you had larger floor plates, which meant that your visual environment was predominantly the ceiling and the vertical planes, which is the wall. So, I mean, this is an example of a project we did in 2001. So one of my first projects for JP Morgan, where we use category 2 kind of mirror optics. We got extremely good, what you call horizontal plane illuminance. But if you look at the space looks very dull and gloomy, because the ceiling is not well lit up and your verticals are not very well lit up. So this resulted in the space looking very dull and gloomy, which resulted in a lot of attrition in IT spaces, in spaces where people were not very happy going to offices. And this was a quick realization which happened over a period of time. And there were also issues that when people started using PC screens for 12 to 14 hours continuously, and they were looking at the screen with a predominantly dark background, they had a lot of stress on the ciliary muscles, and people started having watering of the eyes, and a lot of visual issues with the eyes were happening. And that's when SIPSI immediately in 2003 recommended that we need to kind of change this and look at how we can improve the well-being of the people who are working inside the space. So with the traditional fixed illuminance system, which was there in 1996, the primary issues, like I said, was that the office was looking dull and gloomy. Category 2 delta distribution left the ceilings dark. Only horizontal plane illuminances were defined. So even though the task actually changed from the horizontal tabletop to vertical and became a paperless office, we were still defining only horizontal plane illuminances and uniformities. So the vertical plane illuminances and the ceiling illuminances, which is important for prolonged working on video display units, were not defined. So the contrast ratio of that 3:1 between the task and the surrounding, because your screen already is a bright screen. Now, if you look at a bright screen against a dark background, then your ciliary muscles are very stressed. So to avoid that, you need to have a 3:1 contrast between the task and the surrounding. So that is where the vertical illuminance was coming into picture. And also the other aspect which was being, so earlier it was task-based and application-based. It was never based on the age group of people and the preferences of the people occupying the space. So for example, a 20-year-old would require much lesser lux levels than a 60-year-old. A 60-year-old actually requires 15 times more lux levels to the same task as compared to a 20-year-old. So this was not defined in the earlier standards because it was based on a basic task-based system. So that is when the new directions came up in 2005 from SIPSI, which was called the LG7 standards, which then basically divided the office space. Office also evolved into a club office environment where you had the concentration areas, which were the workstations, and the areas of like the cabins, and then you had the communication spaces like the meeting rooms and all of those, which required a different kind of lighting level. Now, depending on the age group of people, they defined that you cannot fix 300 or 400 lux. It has to be variable anywhere between 300 to 1000 lux, depending on the age group of the people who are occupying the space. It also defined two important parameters. One is the ceiling illuminance, which should be at least 150 lux, and the walls, which should be at least 200 lux. Now, this we are talking 2005. It's almost 15, 16 years back. Even today, if you look at most offices across the globe, people still talk about horizontal plane illuminance. They never talk about vertical plane and ceiling illuminance. Any office which is designed by a standard MEP consultant, all they look at is, okay, am I getting 350 lux on the tabletop? Am I getting a uniformity of 60 or 70%? And that's the whole debate. They never talk about luminances and how the visual environment is looking. And so these were the new directions which came in. It was not a standard in 2005 yet. But then immediately there were a couple of lighting consultants who started looking at how we can achieve this. At this point, I would also like to say that one of the reasons why this did not become popular is because most of the large multinational lighting companies at that point of time had heavily invested in mirror optics And this was a complete shift because this kind of took away mirror optics out of the picture. And you had to have ceiling illuminance, which means you were widening the overall this thing. So people did not really promote this concept because they had heavily invested in mirror optics. And I would blame some of the large lighting companies which really did not put this to practice immediately. But if I look at it, this is typically how I would want to have an office space look like as per the new standards, which basically means that I have a completely lit ceiling and I have some kind of a task lighting which kind of every individual can adjust to their requirements in terms of intensity as well as color temperature. You have some vertical illuminance where we light up the drapes or the walls. So you have good vertical illuminance. So overall, if you compare this to the earlier picture which I showed, the visual environment is really bright. This is nothing like, it's as good as sitting under the sky and creating that kind of an effect. And but one of the disadvantages with this was the fact that the lighting load definitely goes higher, because when you do something like this, you are looking at a lighting power density of about 1 to 1.2 watts per square feet. And 2006-07 is when the LEED standards came into picture, where they started talking about carbon footprint and all companies started becoming more and more aware about energy efficiency. So achieving something like this at, let us say, 0.8 or 0.6 watts per square feet becomes very difficult, and that is where the challenge always remains. And these were some of the other experiments which a lot of lighting companies came up with, where we moved away from the mirror optics, came up with the concept of a direct indirect kind of light, which would give a more diffuse lighting, does not cut off the glare at 65 degrees, but still doesn't create harsh reflections on the screen. And then you would also have a set of wall washers which would light up the walls separately. But effectively what happens is you're still consuming a lot of power. You're not able to get a sustainable design with low carbon footprint with this kind of system. These were some of the other innovations which came up with some of the European companies, where you had these microprismatic optics downward and you had an upward component. And for some reason, because these luminaires were very small at that time, I mean, this is all times when there were no LEDs. So they used this compact fluorescent lamp called the PLL, which had extremely high lumens packed into it. And this also resulted in some kind of a patch luminance. So even though you are having indirect lighting, you're not getting a uniform smooth glow in the ceiling, you're getting these bright patch luminances which are more than 1,000 candles per meter square. And this effectively was creating certain amount of reflections on the screen. So it's also not the ideal scenario. Then came some of the floor standing up and down lighters, where again, if you use some kind of an optics to kind of spread out the light, you had a well-balanced lighting, which was good. But if you didn't have that and you had direct light throwing onto the ceiling, then you had these bright patches which created imbalanced lighting. And then in 2007 end is when we really got a big break in terms of how we can achieve LG7 standard lighting with one luminaire effectively. And this was a new innovation from Sylvania Concord, which strangely was also bought over by Havells at one point of time. And this was one of the first luminaires which actually became semi-recessed, and you had some kind of a optics which would throw light into the ceiling. So you still had a flushed luminaire which could throw light into the ceiling and effectively get more ceiling illuminance and good vertical illuminance. We did one of the first projects immediately in 2008 with these luminaires which were semi-recessed. It was the Volkswagen headquarters at that point of time. And so it was one of the first projects where we executed this in India. And if you see this, just with these luminaires, you have a fairly good glow in the ceiling. And the overall space looks much brighter, and it's a more conducive visual environment for work. By 2008 end, then LEED started picking up. Green building standards were becoming more and more popular. And one of the key aspects in green building, especially if you're looking for a platinum rating, which most people were trying to at that point of time, was the fact that they introduced something called as a personal task light. Most people did not understand what a task light was. So usually what they ended up doing was put up a table lamp, which everybody can adjust, and did the general lighting. But overall, with this, green buildings, if you see most of the offices which were designed during 2008 to 10, ended up being extremely dark because they were primarily focusing on a task light, which was like a table lamp, which really didn't do much of a job. And the overall space was looking very dull and gloomy. So the whole LG7 guidelines got defeated there. We came up with a interesting solution, which was an intelligent task light, which was a major source, not just a table lamp. So it was something which gets integrated onto the workstation. It was a 20-watt T5 tube at that point of time with a built-in sensor where you could individually adjust the lighting. This was actually a prototype of what we designed. It also has an upward component which throws light onto the ceiling. So what we looked at was how we can interspace an LG7 semi-recessed luminaire with the task light in between. So the combination of this, so because this wouldn't throw all the way up there, so we were able to space these out very well, reduce the number of lights in the ceiling by almost 40%, and introduce these task lights, where we were able to achieve a LPD of 0.65. We're looking at this with T5, mind you, it's not even LEDs. We're talking about T5s where we were able to achieve 0.6 watts a square feet at that point of time. And this was one of the first prototypes we designed for the Raheja's corporate office in Mumbai. It was a prototype, a small office, but that's how it turned out. So you had the upward component of the task light, which would throw light into the ceiling and kind of cover up the patches which were being created with these. So the blend of the two was kind of a success. It kind of gave the perfect visual ambience to the whole space. You also got this good vertical illuminance on the partitions which were coming behind the screen. So overall, you were able to achieve LG7 standards, and you were also able to achieve the LEED guidelines in terms of LPDs. Then with the advent of LEDs, you had a whole new gamut of luminaires which came in, where you had the suspended up down lighters. Again, one of the reasons why these became popular is, well, you know, during the 2008 onward, there were a lot of startups who were working from cafes. So effectively, cafes became workstations, and that is where the whole concept of co-working spaces came in. And they all came from a background of a cafe. So offices then started looking like cafes, and that's what is happening even today, where offices are looking like cafes, and cafes are primarily designed by retail designers and not office designers. And a lot of these retail luminaires started coming into office spaces, which is not really good, because the UGR rating of these are definitely more than 21, 24. And for office spaces, you're looking at a UGR less than 19, and we even design spaces with UGR less than 16. Now, if you look at something like this, where you have a really small aperture, and these luminaires usually come with at least 28 to 30 watts per meter. And when you punch so much of flux into the space, and you have a really slim opal diffuser, your luminance here again goes high. So you still have more than, if you take a luminance gun and measure here, you definitely get more than 1,000 luminance per 1,000 candelas per meter square, which is not good again. If you had these kind of suspended up and down, again, you had these patches happening in the ceiling, not the best of solutions again. So if you're looking at slot lights, you should at least look at 150 mm, like how the TechZone luminaires were designed. The TechZone usually had originally for the workspaces a 100 mm slot where you could fit in a diffuser and a luminaire, which fairly you can control the luminance less than 300 to 400 candelas per meter square. This, of course, is a good option, which is a refractor optics, which kind of refracts the light into the ceiling, and it also throws fairly good, gives fairly good vertical illuminance. sleek luminaire, which originally was restricted to only cabins and meeting rooms. But today, with technology improvement and with LEDs, you can have one source which basically throws light into the ceiling, refracts upward as well as refracts downward. So because of the refraction, even with 150 you are able to restrict the luminances and control the glare. You can still achieve UGR less than 16 with these kind of solutions, and gives a fairly uniform glow in the ceiling with the uniformity more than 50%, and you can create that sky effect. This is another issue which, like I mentioned earlier, with a lot of these cafe kind of concepts coming in, people started doing away with a false ceiling and doing open ceilings. Initially, it started with low ceiling heights and how you can improve the ceiling heights. But then what happened was, when you have these really dark ceilings, the overall visual environment, you can see this compared to most of the other spaces, your visual environment is really dark. And forget looking at a PC screen against this background, even these luminaires, which are extremely bright against this dark background, is really annoying. I mean, I've worked in a lot of these kind of spaces, and you really cannot sit there and work more than 2-3 hours comfortably. And this is one of the biggest issues and challenges in the industry today. We have spoken with a lot of architects and interior designers who design these kind of spaces, and tried to tell them that at least if you're doing these kind of spaces, you should have something like a floating ceiling right above the workstations, which can be predominantly or preferably white, so that you can get some amount of reflected light back and your space looks much more brighter. So that's kind of an evolution of how we have come to what we are today. Now today, like I said, we have the version 4 of the LEED standards, which predominantly talks about sustainability and how we can reduce the lighting load and how you can introduce lighting controls to improve the overall carbon footprint and stuff like that. So when we look at the latest LEED standards, it predominantly says that the overall lighting power density has to be less than 0.7 watts per square feet. And we should be able to achieve a LPD of less than 0.6 watts per square feet in open workstation area. Provide lighting controls for at least 90% of individual spaces. For shared spaces, provide group controls, meet average surface reflectance values of the ceiling of at least 85%, wall of 60%, and floors of 25%. So this one aspect itself is like a boon to most lighting consultants, because it says that you have to have a ceiling reflectance of at least 85%. If you have a dark ceiling, that's definitely not possible. The walls have to have at least 60% and the floors at least 25%. So you're looking at a fairly bright light surfaces. Install daylight sensors for at least 25% of the connected lighting load in peripheral areas. And what is more important is the fact that finally they have come to some amount of the visual aspects of lighting, which is brought into the LEED guidelines, where it says that the ceiling illuminance has to be at least 30% of the work plane illuminance, and the vertical illuminance has to be at least 50% of the work plane illuminance, something which NBC has now put forward. It was only, I think, in 2011 and 12 that NBC came up with these standards, and now it's part of the LEED standards. So what it basically means is, if you have about 400 lux on the tabletop, you need to have at least 150 lux of that in the ceiling. I don't know how even today whether LEED consultants are even looking at these aspects, but this is something which is very important now for LEED certification. So that's pretty much about the sustainability aspect. We all know about that. Let us now look at the WELL standards. WELL now has got a version 2, which predominantly talks about the well-being of people inside the office space. So WELL not only looks at the visual aspects, it also looks at the physiological aspects of light and how daylight is controlled in the space and everything. So WELL predominantly touches upon visual acuity, circadian lighting, electric light glare control, solar glare control, low glare workstation design, color quality, surface design, automated shading and dimming controls, right to light for every occupant, daylight exposure, and daylight fenestration. So these are all covered under WELL standards. So if you're designing a LEED plus WELL standard or WELL certified project, then pretty much all of this is covered. We'll just look at in detail what each of these mean. Visual acuity is purely about photopic illumination, about what we already discussed in terms of the 60 standards. It says that you have to have a horizontal illuminance of at least 350 lux. A ceiling illuminance of at least 30% on the work plane, similar to what has come from the LEED standards as well. Plus, it also talks about task lighting, where it says you have to have task lighting which provides at least 300 to 600 lux, which if your ambient lighting in the workstation area is less than 300 lux. Then we look at one of the most talked about aspects, which is circadian lighting. So there's a big confusion between human-centric lighting and circadian lighting. So circadian lighting is one of the aspects of human-centric lighting. When we talk about human-centric lighting, it is all of these put together. All of these put together is what we call as human-centric lighting, where it's about lighting ergonomics of the office space, where the human being is the key criteria based on which the whole space is designed. So, of course, circadian is one of the aspects of it. We all know that as the day progresses, the natural light emitted by the sunlight, both in terms of color temperature, angle, and intensity varies. So if you see, that's how the color temperature of the sun and intensity varies from morning to evening. And we are all diurnal people. We are all supposed to wake up when the sun comes up and go to sleep when the sun goes down. And this is because we have something called as a biological clock, or the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which basically keeps track of the sunlight. So in a natural environment, when we didn't have buildings, we were easily able to keep track of the sunlight and how the progression of the color temperature happens from morning to evening. But when we are in an office space, what happens is you are restricted to let's say a fixed 3000 Kelvin or 4000 Kelvin or 6000 Kelvin. So effectively, your body clock is not able to keep track of the sunlight. Even though you have glazing in some areas, we have seen that almost 60% of the office space with large office plates do not have ample amount of sunlight coming in. And if there is a good amount of sunlight coming in as well, because of the glare, most people bring the drapes down, and so you're not really experiencing the sunlight that's happening outside. So what exactly is circadian lighting? Circadian lighting is a concept that electric tunable white LED lighting can be used to support long-term human health of the occupants and improve their productivity by simulating the natural daylight outside within the office space by intensity tuning, color tuning, and stimulus tuning. There are several symbologic, circadian, geocentric lighting management system softwares available. Some are clinically proven, some just follow a natural daylight pattern. But all of these is for the well-being of people. And it also works well when you are also doing night shifts. So India is one of the places where this started becoming more popular than the West, because of the fact that most of the call centers of most of the American companies were in India. And that's where people were working in night shifts, which was completely against nature. That's why circadian lighting is kind of becoming more and more popular in India as compared to Europe and US. Just to give a brief detail about circadian lighting. This is more of fifth standard biology, where we know about rods and cones. These are the rods, these are the cones, which are responsible for seeing things. We know these rods and cones are connected to the ganglion cells, which in turn connects to the optical tract, to the visual cortex, and that's how you see things. It was only in 2003 by Dr. Brainard who discovered that there were certain ganglion cells in the retina which were not connected to rods and cones, which actually had a direct path which connected to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or what we call as the biological clock. What you see the red is the optical tract, and what you see in purple here is the non-image forming tract. So light entering your eyes through both helps in seeing things, and it also helps in the overall well-being of your body. Just understand what the biological clock is all about. The suprachiasmatic clock basically controls your ultradian rhythm, which happens every minute and second. It controls your circadian rhythm, which is your daily rhythm, circa-lunar rhythm, and circa-annual rhythms. And this is typically how, from morning to evening, ideally, if you are waking up at 6 a.m. When the sun rises, this is ideally how your system is supposed to work. So if you wake up at 6 a.m., by 6:45, there is a rise in blood pressure. About 1.5 hours after you wake up, your melatonin secretion, which is responsible for sleep, kind of stops production. You have highest testosterone level at about 9 a.m., which is usually 3 hours from when you wake up. You have high alertness at 10 a.m. That's why you do most of your toughest tasks when you wake up in the morning, and at 10 to 11 is when you do most of those activities. Best coordination is around 4:30 p.m. Fast reaction time is at 3:30 p.m. 4 to 5 p.m. is when they say is the best time for doing workouts, because you burn maximum this time, because you have great cardiovascular and muscle strength at that time. Again, as the sun sets, the blood pressure starts rising again. Your body temperature goes high around 7 p.m. And by 9 p.m., you start secreting more melatonin, and then you go to sleep. And at 4 a.m. is when you have the highest amount of melatonin secretion, and that's when you have deep sleep, and that is also when you have maximum number of accidents happening. So that's your basic circadian rhythm. Why is it important? Because your mood, performance, alertness, body temperature, hormone production of the pineal gland, which is the melatonin, serotonin, hormone production of the adrenal cortex, the structure of the EEG, urine production and its composition, sleep-wake pattern. Basically, all of your body processes are controlled by the circadian rhythm, which is controlled by the light entering your eyes. And this is typically how the color temperature of the sun varies from morning to evening. Of course, it goes as high as 16, 17,000 Kelvin, but yeah, this is typically how, in various parts of the world, it is different as well. I mean, even, so that is why what we usually do is we take the mean average of what happens in a space, in a city, and that's what you're adapted to. So every individual has a different circadian cycle depending on the sunlight in where they're born and brought up. What are the benefits of human circadian lighting in office spaces? Well, as far as whatever studies we have done on a few projects and some studies which have happened internationally, we know that there is increased alertness in the morning, productivity and concentration improvements, improved mood, reduced hyperactivity, reduction in errors and accidents, faster cognitive processing, reduces post-lunch lethargy, reduced number of coffee and loo breaks, improved sleep at night. So overall, it is better for the staff as well as the employers. And with night shift, things get much better because you do not have any desynchronization of the biological clock. So a person going into night shift can work as efficiently as a person working in the day shift, because we're kind of shifting their clock by 12 hours, and that's how you're able to work efficiently in the nighttime. So it also increased alertness throughout the night shift, productivity and concentration improvements, improved mood, reduced hyperactivity, reduced errors and accidents, faster cognitive processing, less accidents while driving back home. This is also one of the big issues with people working in call centers. Like they spend the whole night there with certain this thing, and they are really sleepy by the time they are going back home, and this ends up in a lot of accidents. So when you have a circadian software, which kind of mimics the sunlight, we also give something called as a safe home boost, which kind of keeps them active till they reach home. And then after that, they get really good sleep when they are back home. Circadian lighting also is kind of quantified in terms of what we call as melanopic lux. Basically, so there is a relation between how much of the photopic lux is equivalent to melanopic lux, and surprisingly, it is not same for each kind of light source. So for every light source, artificial light source, except even though incandescent light source has got a 100% color rendering index, as we know, but the melanopic ratio of incandescent lamp is much lower. It's only 0.54 of what the others are, and LEDs is even lower at 2700 Kelvin. So if you look at this, a 4000 Kelvin LED has maximum effect on the melanopic lux. So you have about 76%. So which means that if you have designed the office space for 350 lux with 4000 Kelvin LEDs, you are approximately getting about 250 melanopic lux, which will keep your circadian system active. I'm not saying that this will help in kind of synchronizing with the daylight, but at least it has an impact in terms of keeping your melatonin suppressed and getting your activity level better. Then we look at lighting glare control, where we already have a unified glare rating system now. So we are looking at a UGR less than 16 or less than 19 in an office space. Room surface design, this is also very important, where we already discussed that your ceiling reflectance has to be at least 80%, wall reflectance has to be at least 70%, and furniture system should be at least 50%. So it's also defining in terms of what color combinations to be used inside the office space so that the overall lighting is well balanced. Yes, and it does talk about at least 30% of the ceiling illuminance to be on the work plane and at least 50% of it on the, on the walls. This is one of the other aspects where we look at how we can control the glare coming in from the sunlight, and maximum utilization of sunlight can happen in an office space. We all know most of the large offices today, most of them are glazed buildings, but 90% of the times when in the morning, when the sun is at the horizon and there is a lot of glare, people pull down the drapes and they never pull it back. So throughout the day, the drapes are down because they experience that glare in the morning, and even though in the afternoon when the sun goes up, there is no glare and you have good amount of quality daylight coming in, the drapes are still drawn down. So that is where you have to have either some kind of an external mechanism which cuts down the glare and maximizes the amount of daylight that is coming in, or you should have motorized blinds which are connected to a advanced lighting management system, which will check the luminances from the sun's rays and accordingly adjust the drapes. It is not that you adjust the drapes based on a timer. You basically have luminance sensors which are fixed onto the glass, which will detect direct rays from the sunlight as well as reflected rays from the sun. So if you have, for example, a glazed building near to you and the sun is kind of reflecting on that glass and coming back and creating a past luminance, a high luminance into the space, then the blinds automatically self-adjust. So this is also being described as one of the standards in the WELL standards. And then of course, low glare workstation design, which means you avoid using high gloss material, which will kind of create reflected light onto the, reflected glare. So we are supposed to have matte finishes and preferably light colored surfaces when it comes to the furniture selection. Color rendering, of course, it says that you have to have a color rendering more than 80%, but especially with LEDs, we have seen that the R9 content, the red content is usually low, and that is where it says that the color rendering index of R9 has to be at least 50% in the light source that you're using in the office space. Then, of course, the personalized lighting, where every individual, or the right to light for every individual in the office space, where each individual should be able to adjust the lighting to their requirements. These are some of the various options of how you can have the personal task light. This was originally what we showed as one of the designs, where we've used it extensively on a lot of green buildings. These are some of the newer concepts which come up in terms of how you can do personalized task lighting, where both now with the tunable system, you can also adjust the color temperature as well as intensity and the lux levels, depending on each individual's requirement. Also reduces the number of lights in the ceiling. If you notice in each of these cases, extremely far-spaced ceiling elements. You get a very clean ceiling. You don't have to go with conventional 2x2s. You can do, various kinds of, because you're looking at only about 200 lux coming in from the ceiling, and the rest is all coming from the task light itself. So that's predominantly how we look at blending sustainability with well-being. One of the projects we did in 2016 was the Northern Trust facility in Pune, which was one of the most advanced tunable white circadian lighting system, which also took care of well standards from a lighting perspective. And also it was a LEED Gold. We recently got the LEED Gold rating for this project. If you see, what's interesting is inside spaces, you can vary the color temperature depending on the sunlight outside. So all of these spaces, depending on how the color temperature of the sun in Pune changes, the lighting also changes on a circadian software. What we were a little worried about was how you will be working inside the office space with the varying color temperature. So if you have like a 2500 Kelvin on the tabletop, it's not very conducive. If you notice daylight outside the way it is, the sky is what really changes the color. If you look outside, you're usually looking at about 4,500 to 5,500 to 6,000 Kelvin. That's what is the variance in the color temperature inside. So the task area should really not be changing its color. What should be changing is the overall ambience. So we looked at a dual optics luminaire here, because this was again one of the projects where the client wanted something recessed in the ceiling. They didn't want a suspended kind of a luminaire. So we looked at a dual optics where you had these diffusers which were tunable. They changed their color temperature from morning to evening. And you had a laser blade optics in the middle, which would kind of throw light onto the tabletop, which is fixed at 4,000 Kelvin. So your functional lighting varies only between 4,000 to 5,500, and the overall ambience kind of changes in terms of the overall space. It gives a very natural feel, natural sunlight feel in the office space. Again, in closed cabins, where we used stretch fabric ceiling with tunable white LEDs, and also in different sections. And so these are again divided into different zones horizontally, so that you can utilize the space for various application areas like the video conferencing and for a general presentation and stuff like that. This is their general training center. Again, we created the same. So all areas which did not have any kind of daylight coming in, we kind of created the sky effect and the tunable system. Like I said earlier, also where in the collapse spaces and breakout spaces, where again, the designers wanted to go with the open cell ceiling, open ceiling concept, but then we recommended that instead of going for a dark ceiling, we go with a light white ceiling, which makes the space looks much more brighter and doesn't look dull and gloomy. So that's the other way of how we look at it if you have an open ceiling concept as well. And of course, they were all connected to a motorized blind, which through the lighting management system, which would basically adjust the drapes based on the luminances coming in from the sunlight. So this overall system works fantastic. And even if you look at all of these kind of luminaires, the central optics is kind of fixed at 4,000 K, and the wing kind of changes color. So the overall indirect lighting changes its color temperature. So that's pretty much how it was. Yes, this was one of the projects where it was 100% compliant to well lighting standards. Of course, they did not look at most of the other aspects of well, but from a lighting perspective, it was 100% compliant, truly human-centric, because we took care of all of the other aspects of the CIPC 7, LG7 standards, as well as the well standards in terms of this thing. We had an advanced lighting management system, which not only kind of does dim up and down of lights based on movement and daylight, but it also collects data in terms of heat map, and kind of has a option for connectivity to an IoT system via backnet, so that you can have an exact idea of how many people are occupying the space. A lot of other data, security data, and a lot of the other can be kind of propagated from this basic lighting management system, which was again a DALI-based system. The conference rooms were equipped with zoned circadian lighting, which can also do tunable white. And the way we designed the tunable white system is also such that we did a pilot project for one of the global companies. It's a global project where we looked at how the skin tone of every individual can be well enhanced during a video conferencing. So if you have varying skin tones of different people, the camera usually picks up either a dark person or a light colored person. So what we have done with a tunable white system is that the lighting adapts to the skin tone of the person who is speaking inside the space. So each individual is well enhanced depending, irrespective of their color, the skin tone. So this was overall a project which kind of worked well, where we can say that it's a true example of how we have blended sustainability with well-being. With that, I kind of end my presentation, and we can look at some questions.
Thanks, Mr. Pampy. Those were some very interesting points that you highlighted, and a brief journey of lighting over the years that you gave us. And you also mentioned that there are already guidelines available for sustainability, for wellness. It is the right application by the architects and designers, which is very important. So we also have some audience questions, and at this point, I would also request Mr. Karmakar to join the conversation to take some questions. Mr. Karmakar, we have one question here that, Mr. Praveen Thampi was talking about how sustainability has become one of the important features in today's buildings and smart buildings. As manufacturer, how are you meeting this demand for sustainable solutions in lighting?
I think it's a very important question when it comes to a lighting company. We definitely have to be responsible for creating solutions and products which are sustainable, because anything which we are creating necessarily has to support the climate change and should support the planet. So how I look at it in translating the same thing to our products and services is we look at a right kind of choice of components. So the components which are there, they have to be more energy efficient, so that the efficiency of the entire solution goes much higher. So whether the choice of components, the complete efficacy of the complete luminaire, and the overall intelligence which it is required for giving a complete solution. So when it comes to smart building, one of the most important element, as we saw in the presentation also, is the need of lighting controls, so that you are able to manage it properly. Because when a right choice of components, right design of the complete product, and it is backed with a good intelligent controls, we will be certainly able to achieve a good amount of energy saving, and certainly can achieve best of the lead standards. So that's how our development is happening. So we have from lighting industry, if you say, we have responsibility to continuously keep on raising the bar. So we have a full-fledged innovation team which is working continuously on bringing intelligent solutions as well as bringing new forms and shapes. And we also have beyond innovation team, we have the manufacturing setup, which actually looks into how we blend together all these aspects and come out with the right product and solutions.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Thampi, like Partha said that, the manufacturers are also now bringing out new advanced solutions. You mentioned how products have, improvements in products have happened over the years. The specifications have changed over the years. You have done projects in a lot of other countries. including India. Do you see any difference in Western and Indian market in terms of products available for lighting?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the overall standards itself and in terms of office lighting, I would say India is far ahead of most of Europe and US and most of these countries, predominantly because we have indigenously now a lot of products available in India, which are far superior in terms of technology. So adaptation of technology has been faster in India. And one of the reasons for this is because most of these large multinational companies have their large offices in India. And that's why India has become a focus market in terms of, and like I said, well, this is possibly one of the only countries in the world where we have maximum amount of night shift happening. People working in call centers. I mean, we are the call center of the world. So that is where we have kind of adapted to new technologies in terms of lighting. And like I said, even NBC came up with standards much later as compared to what we were already adopting in India. Yes, in terms of policy, we are lagging behind, but in terms of executing interesting and innovative projects in office lighting, and in terms of the availability of the products today in India, we have really good lighting manufacturers in India who can do really good technology-based products, which are really advanced.
That's fantastic. So India is on the right track, and in fact, in terms of green buildings, also India is one of the leading countries to have the number of green buildings. So sustainability, we are doing quite well on those standards. Again, Partha, I'll come to you.
The other issues which I have noticed is like 80% of the offices even today doesn't talk about vertical illuminance and ceiling illuminance. Most, you ask any project managers from any of, I'm not naming any of them, CBRE, JLL, across the board. If you look at office lighting, all they talk about is 350 lux on the tabletop and achieving uniformity, that's it. Even companies. So the problem is most of these guys are the ones who are advising the companies, and that is where, the importance of good quality lighting does. Of course, a lot of companies are realizing it bad way, and they're coming up and looking at lighting consultants. But even today, most of it is driven by electrical consultants, and all they look at is achieving those LPDs from a lead perspective and achieving those lux levels in terms of, that 350 lux to 400 lux on the tabletop. That's it. And that's the sad reality.
Lack of awareness among building owners and probably sometimes even the architects or designers or the building managers, which is a challenge as of now.
I mean, pretty much most of the projects which I work with, I have an argument with the interior designers, especially in terms of the ceiling design, the color of the ceiling, the walls, because those are important because that kind of makes the visual environment better. So, and then I actually have to run this whole presentation to them to make them understand why you need this. Otherwise, it's as good as, telling a layman as to why this is being done. And now, like I said, there are issues where I'm facing with the whole concept of workspaces looking more like cafes. A lot of retail designers are coming in, bringing in a lot of retail luminaires, which are not conducive for prolonged working in an office space. And I have seen people using projectors in workstations. And I'm not talking about small interior designers. I'm talking about large international companies which do office design, making these kind of mistakes. So that's where the whole, awareness has to come in. Again, it's one person holding the flag does not help. It has to be, a larger awareness that has to really happen.
That's right. And that is what this entire series is all about, creating awareness among all stakeholders. Mr. Karmakar, what do you have to say? Like what Mr. Pampy said, that that awareness is a big problem, not only among the clients, but also even the influencers, the specifiers, the architects and designers. And, so what do you have to say on that? You must have also come across those challenges.
Yeah, certainly very, very apt and relevant challenge which is there in the marketplace, where the right blend of lead and wellness is not happening so much. So as a responsible player in lighting, what we have done is we are first of all bringing, because we can talk about something when we are better aware of it. So we are bringing this this initiative, and couple of other initiatives are there, so we get the right kind of a knowledge base into us, so which goes into our innovation, which goes into our touch points in the marketplace, which also goes into the solutions which we are providing, some lighting designs and illumination designs which we provide to the marketplace. So bringing the right kind of information and also passing on. Second, we are doing in terms of the products. Yeah, we realize that everything is not available with everybody. So how we are able to prioritize few things which can actually bring in right solution, and that I think is a continuous journey. It cannot be, can never be complete with that, and we are continuously introducing new products. And it is all also about connected lighting, where a good amount of research is required, so that as Praveen have been mentioning about the wellness. So wellness is so important, and right kind of lighting is so important. One good thing is incidentally, or rather coincidentally, and the brand promise of Havells is better light and better life. So we definitely have to bring in solutions which are supporting this claim by us.
Right, right. That's good to hear. Praveen, you also mentioned about the new products that have come up, and now it is LED, which is the latest, which is in the lighting segment. What are the new shifts that you are looking at, which are going to come up in the near future, or are already happening in other markets in terms of products, in terms of systems?
So when we look at LEDs with tunable lighting and stuff like that, I mean, predominantly now what happens is when people talk about tunable light, they talk about what's normally available in the market. The chips which are available are usually between 3,000 to 6,500. So usually people say we have something which does 3,000 to 6,500, and this is tunable, and that's circadian. And that really doesn't work. You need to also look at the color spectrum, because the color spectrum of the sunlight is also varying. So the trend is that instead of using, a 3000 Kelvin chip and a 6500 Kelvin chip and doing this tunable, I mean, usually when I specify between 2000 to 8000 Kelvin, which is a larger spectrum, because 10,000 is really difficult to get. So 8,000 is fairly good enough in terms of achieving that cool white light. But we also need to understand that the color spectrum also matters, because that has more of an impact than the color temperature in terms of how it affects your circadian cycle. So what's new is you have these RGB WW chips, which kind of does both the color tuning and the spectral tuning. And you're able to then get a rich natural sunlight, which can vary its color temperature, and it will also have those varying spectrum in terms of the wavelength. So yeah, that's the future. There are a couple of companies that are already looking at it. There is also a DIN standard which now has started certifying human-centric or a circadian lighting product. Not too many products which have been certified, but there are these few guidelines which have already come into play. So when you already have a DIN standard for certifying circadian lighting, that's a big thing, then a lot of tall claims can go to rest, and you really have something to measure up to.
That's right. So we need to have genuine products in the market. Any product that you would like to mention, Partha, that the company has introduced?
We have actually done a couple of good projects in North, in Bangalore, and in a couple of other cities, where we have introduced a solution where certainly, what the well standard needs, and there is a upward light component as well as the downward light component. And the choice of products are one end of one part of the whole solution. And another very important aspect is the lighting design part of it, where good designers like Praveen can actually help us in locating the products at the right places of the interior so that the walls are lit properly. So our role gets limited, that we have to be in the right zone of providing complete solution where it is meeting the requirement of the lighting designer, and at the same time the product itself is also offering all the possible controls, all the possible bandwidth of color changing and dimmability, and also various form factors, so that we are not creating huge patch luminances from the products. So that's how we have also been designing the products, and few are in the kitchen, few more are there. So we look forward to really a lot of dynamism in this portfolio rationalization, and I look forward to a lot of such installations for us to refer to.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So there are a lot of new things coming up in Indian market as well. So let me just give you two rapid fire questions. We have a lot of questions, but because of the limitation of time, we'll just take two quick questions. Praveen, we'll start with you. What, according to you, is wellness in commercial spaces or office spaces?
Well, like I said, it is about how you can work in a natural environment where your circadian system is fully synchronized with least amount of glare, with personalized lighting where I can adjust the lighting to my requirement. And that, I think, to me is the most ideal scenario from a wellness perspective inside a workspace.
Okay, fantastic. Partha, what according to you is wellness in commercial spaces?
Yeah, I would say it is it's a common sense, because it should not become human-centric lighting, because it's like, people are eating food for health, so light should be also for people. So why human-centric now? It is a human-centric, definitely. It is not a new thing. Human comforting light, where a human being is able to have a feel of a natural light. That is all the pursuit, that we need to create an ambience where somebody can actually work like a natural light outside the interiors. So that's what I feel.
Okay, so not human-centric, but way of life now, the lighting should be. Okay, so last question. Smart is the future. Everyone talks about smart buildings, smart living, smart way of working. So how, Partha, as a manufacturer, are you addressing this shift in the market towards smart buildings?
See, one of the important things which I feel smart means, smart brings intelligence. Long back, when buildings were not smart, there used to be like many hundred buildings isolated. Now smart means it is all integrated. It's having the best of efficiency, and also providing best of the productivity for people using the spaces. So it has to be very safe. It has to be changing the positions as well as usages of different ambiances. It should be able to communicate with different services. So as a contributor to the industry, we always keep this in the mind, that our new innovations are keeping that in mind. And one of the most important thing is education. When we are talking to various stakeholders in the marketplace as well as internal, so we are keeping that in the mind while we are becoming a spokesman of this shift in the market, because this is the future.
Right, this is the future. Same question, Praveen, to you. Smart is the future. So how, as a designer, you are addressing this shift towards smart buildings?
Well, we are already designing a lot of smart projects. And yeah, I mean, like I said, the space where lighting today, if you look at an IoT-based system, most of the IoT-based systems are fundamentally based on a lighting management system. That's the kind of main vertebra based on which all of the IoT systems work. So you will possibly look at Li-Fi, where your for your internet comes through the light, your blinds get controlled anyway through this thing. Your meeting rooms are scheduled based on sensors which we use in the lighting, which will, based on occupancy and availability, schedule the availability of the meeting rooms, look at how many people are occupying a space, and do a lot of other data processing based on that. So that's the future. I mean, I would look at it this way, that even HVAC control, everything inside an office space can be controlled by an intelligent lighting management system. And that's really the future.
Okay, intelligent, human-centric, which gives wellness to the people who are using it. So these are some of the buzzwords for the lighting segment and for all of us today. So thanks, Mr. Praveen Pampy. Thanks, Mr. Partha Karmakar, for sharing your views and for answering the audience questions, whichever we could take in the given time. But I'm sure our viewers had some very valuable takeaways from today's session. And our special thanks once again to Havells India for presenting this knowledge sharing session for the benefit of the Indian design fraternity, to our speaker, and to our awesome audience as well for being here, sharing their time and sending in their queries. So dear viewers, keep watching this space as we bring to you very soon yet another acclaimed design expert to share with us more about the magical world of lighting. On that note, thanks, Mr. Praveen Pampy, once again for sharing your time, sharing your views, and being here with us on this series. Thanks, Mr. Partha Karmakar, for being here with us on this episode. So thank you, everyone. Take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.